Great. Well, I'm Joy Frestedt, and I have a PhD in laboratory medicine and pathology. Been working in clinical research about 30 years, and decided about 3.5 years ago to start a company called Frestedt Incorporated. And our job is to help companies with their clinical, regulatory, and quality affairs work. By virtue of the work that I've done over the years, this has been a word-of-mouth kind of arrangement, and people who need additional support will call and ask us to help them with specific projects in clinical quality and regulatory areas. Everything from writing a protocol to monitoring the trials to writing up the reports and presenting information to publications or also to regulatory agencies. We do a fair amount of work in those areas. Was recently able to bring Pamela Wolff on to be a strategic project manager for Frestedt Incorporated, and she just became full-time the first of this month, so I'm very excited to have Pamela with me. So ISO 14155 is the international standard looking at clinical trials management, basically. And the recent update in January of this year, 2011, was to try to incorporate many of the things that hadn't been incorporated previously, like essential document management and risk management. So 14971 is now incorporated by reference into 14155. So what it's doing in the device world is raising the bar for clinical research compliance. And there are now finally some lists of what documents should be stored in your file. This has always been a point of discussion amongst many of my clients because we do both pharmaceutical and device and food work. We have the benefit of having seen lots of different structures in operation, and it wasn't until very recently now that this clarity is being added to understand what types of documents need to be stored where, whether it's the site or the sponsor or the CRO that's managing the files. The 14155 now is broken into project management sections, so the clinical trial is laid out from startup, what do you have to have and do, to the actual conduct, and then when you close out the study, what do you need to do. And then there's specific information for the sponsor responsibilities as well as the principal investigator. So it's keeping pace with some of the things that are going on globally, including things like the directive last year from Medical Device Directive 271, which now requires clinical experience for any device. So this is another in line with that kind of rising bar and making devices very well studied and trying to help companies. So a lot of the work we do is to help companies understand what that means to their quality system, also what it means practically to their teams in terms of how do you run a clinical trial and document it for regulatory submission globally in any given country. And then how do you practice this in the trenches? So we do a fair amount of gap analysis. We help with SOP design to build, but what we do predominantly is help them with their individual clinical projects and regulatory submissions to make sure they're robust and they meet the spirit of these new regulations.
Right now it's difficult because one of the things is that ISO 14155 is technically an international standard, but it's actually a guidance document. It's not a law or regulation. In addition, you have, depending upon what other countries you're in, you have what I want to say national regulation or national laws that you have to abide by. So one of the difficulties is incorporating, if you're doing trials both, like let's say in the US and overseas, then you need to have your SOPs and work instructions and corporate documents to be able to reflect the regulations on both sides. And to have one set of unified documents that encompasses all the details that are required. ISO 14155, the new version in 2011, is 65 pages long. And if you made a checklist out of it, it's probably longer than that with each little detail, and everything takes effort and a conscientious eye on detail to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's for everything. But the same thing with the US regulations. If you are working in Canada, they have their own set of regulations. So to do that, it makes it very difficult. Many companies try diligently to comply with the regulations, but it definitely is a huge challenge.
I guess the recommendation is to think outside your immediate work zone, right? So the more you can talk with others, if you have the luxury of going to meetings to learn more, staying connected is important so that you understand what the changes are and you understand what they mean to your business. Not to detract from your everyday workload, but there needs to be some level of awareness. And then as you grapple with these difficult changes, managers need to understand how to help their teams, because it can be very frustrating if the team knows there's a lot of change that needs to happen and they're not given a leader to help them understand that this is the path we're following, and you get to help clear that path and help us take those steps. So you need a leader as well that can help steer the team and make sure that the effort is timely and not too cumbersome and appropriate for the level of work that you have.